My daughter called me in the middle of a stormy night, her voice weak and broken. "Mom, I'm so cold, help me." "Help my son. Where are you?" I asked, desperate. Connor left me at a bus stop. It hurt so much. And in that instant, a heartbreaking scream came from the other side of the line. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached. The rain was pouring down as if it wanted to drown our entire small town. I was sitting in the small kitchen. The weak yellow light illuminated a pile of freshly washed clothes. My hands slowly folded each garment, trying to keep my mind busy. It was my habit, the habit of a mother used to worrying to keeping everything in the house in order. The drumming of the rain on the tin roof was a roar that seemed to drown out any other sound. But when the phone rang, I jumped. The screen lit up, showing the name I was always waiting for, always worrying about, Grace. I answered immediately, my hands trembling as if I sensed something bad was happening. "Grace, honey," I called, my voice cracking from the whistling wind on the other end of the line. The static was terrible, as if my daughter was in the middle of the storm. Then a faint voice, almost a whisper, was heard. "Mom, I'm so cold. Help me save my baby." I felt my heart stop. The voice of Grace, my daughter, whom I had cradled since she was a tiny thing, was now so weak that I had to press my ear to the phone to hear her. "Where are you, Grace? Tell me where you are." I practically yelled at her, but I only managed to hear a few scattered words. Connor left me at the bus stop. It hurt so much. And then a sharp, gut-wrenching scream shot through the line as if it were tearing the night apart. Then total silence. The call dropped. I stood there paralyzed, the phone still clutched in my hand as if letting go would mean losing her forever. I dialed again and again, but I only heard the cold voice of the operator. "The number you have dialed is not available." My head was spinning. Where was Grace? What had she said about Connor? Which bus stop and the baby, my grandson, what was happening? I stopped thinking and started acting. I grabbed the old raincoat hanging in a corner and took the keys to my husband's truck. He had passed away 3 years ago, leaving me his old truck with its dim headlights and screeching windshield wipers. I ran to the garage, not caring about my soaked shoes or the rain hitting my face. I only had one thought in my head. I had to find Grace. The truck pushed through the white curtain of rain, its weak headlights struggling to pierce the dense water. I drove to the hospital where Grace had her pregnancy checkups. She was almost due, and I remembered her telling me on her last call that she had a checkup today. But when I arrived, the nurse at the front desk shook her head. Miss Grace Hayes was discharged early this morning. Her husband came for her. My heart sank again. Connor had picked her up. Then why was she calling me for help in the middle of a storm? I couldn't believe it. I started the truck and headed to Grace and her husband's house about 10 miles from there. The little house was on the outskirts where she had moved with Connor after they got married. I knocked on the door, shouted her name, but the house was dark without a single response. Only the howling of the rain and wind. I got back in the truck, a knot in my stomach. The westbound highway, the only route from the hospital to her house, came to my mind as the last clue. I drove, stopping at every bus stop, getting out of the vehicle to scream her name in the rain. "Grace, honey?" My voice was lost, carried away by the wind. No one answered. The first bus stop, the second, not a soul, just rain and darkness. When I reached the third one, as the truck's headlights swept across the tin roof, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. A cream-colored maternity coat, the same one I had bought for Grace when she was 7 months pregnant. It was soaked on the dirty ground next to the base of a pole. Nearby, there was a shattered cell phone, its screen broken into 1,000 pieces, as if someone had thrown it forcefully against the ground. I got out of the truck, my legs trembling so much I almost fell. I picked up the coat, clutching it tightly as the cold rainwater trickled through my fingers. "Grace," I whispered. My voice choked. I walked into the bus shelter into a dark corner. And then I saw her. Grace. My daughter was huddled in a corner, shivering from head to toe, holding a newborn baby red and wrapped in a thin diaper. Her face was pale as paper. Her eyes closed, her lips purple. The baby in her arms. My grandson was tiny, fragile, not crying, not moving. "Grace!" I screamed, running towards her. I knelt down the icy water, soaking my pants to the bone, but I didn't care. I quickly took a towel from my bag, wrapped the baby, and took off my own jacket to cover Grace. "Honey, Mom is here." "I'm here," I repeated over and over, my tears mixing with the rain. I got them both into the truck, placed the baby on my lap, trying to keep him warm. My hands were shaking as I dialed 911. "Please come quickly, my daughter, my grandson." I could barely form a sentence. I was just crying. The person on the other end asked where I was, and I just managed to scream. The third bus stop, westbound highway. "Please hurry." I stayed in the truck hugging Grace, trying to warm her with my own body. She opened her eyes slightly, looked at me, and her voice was a thread about to break. "I don't want to die. Connor abandoned me." Then she passed out her head, falling on my shoulder. The ambulance arrived after 10 minutes that felt like an eternity. A young paramedic quickly checked on Grace and the baby. Her voice was rushed but reassuring. "It's a good thing you got here in time. She gave birth alone. The baby has hypothermia and she's exhausted." I just nodded, unable to speak with tears streaming down my face. They put them both in the ambulance and I followed in my truck, gripping the steering wheel to keep from shaking. In my head, Grace's phrase repeated endlessly. "Connor abandoned me." Rage filled me, but I knew it wasn't the time to think about him. I just wanted my daughter and my grandson to be safe. At the hospital, they were taken to the recovery room. I sat in the hallway in my soaked clothes, my hands still trembling. I didn't dare close my eyes. I didn't dare think about what would have happened if I had arrived later. Every time the door to the room opened, I flinched, hoping for good news. Finally, the next morning, a doctor came out to talk to me. His voice was serious but firm. "Your daughter is showing signs of physical and mental exhaustion. She was lucky you saved them both." I nodded, thanking him, but my heart was still heavy. Grace was out of danger. But what had happened to make her give birth alone in the middle of a storm in an abandoned bus stop? And Connor, that son-in-law I once trusted, what had he done to my daughter? The days that followed that stormy night, I walked around like a ghost. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the image of Grace huddled in the corner of the bus stop, hugging her tiny baby with purple lips. 3 days passed in which I barely moved from the hospital, sitting outside the recovery room, waiting for any news. Until the morning of the third day, when Grace woke up, I could finally breathe. She was lying in the hospital bed with tired eyes that lit up when she saw me. "Mom!" she called with a weak voice that melted my heart. I took her hand. It was freezing, as if the cold of that rainy night was still trapped in her body. "You're okay now, sweetie." "I'm here," I whispered, holding back my tears. Grace was very weak, but she recognized me. I asked her about what happened that night, hoping she would tell me everything. But she just shook her head with a lost look in her eyes, repeating the same phrase. Connor left me because I talked back to him. Hearing that broke my soul. Talked back to him. Grace was so gentle. Since she was a child, she had never dared to contradict anyone. How could they blame her like that? I insisted. "What do you mean, talked back? What did you say to him to make him leave you in the middle of a storm?" But Grace just lowered her head, pressing her lips together, and whispered, "I'm scared. I don't want you to worry." I squeezed her hand, trying to hide the fury growing inside me. Scared? What was she scared of? Of Connor, or that I wasn't strong enough to protect her? Connor, the son-in-law I once considered a good man, never showed up at the hospital. Not one visit, not one call. I called him, my voice trembling with anger. "Connor, where are you?" She almost died. But on the other side of the line, there was only silence. And then a curt text message appeared on my screen. "You have no business meddling in my family's affairs." Reading it, I wanted to throw the phone. Family. He dared to call what he had done to Grace a family. I sat there in the hospital hallway looking at the flickering light of the neon bulbs on the ceiling. And I promised myself I wouldn't let this go. I couldn't let Grace continue to live with a man like that. On the 4th day, the doctor discharged Grace. She was still weak, but I didn't want her to stay in the hospital a minute longer. I took my daughter and my grandson to my house, the little house where I had lived for decades, the one that was once filled with Grace's laughter when she was a child. I prepared a bottle for the baby. I changed his diaper, and then I sat next to Grace, watching her hug her son with that same lost look. "I'm going to take care of you two," I told her, trying to make my voice sound firm. "You don't have to worry about anything." Grace just nodded, but I knew she didn't quite believe me. There was something in her eyes like a closed door that I didn't know how to open. Not even a day had passed when, while I was making some broth for Grace in the kitchen, I heard loud, sharp knocks on the door. I opened it, and in front of me was Mrs. Patricia Hayes' mother with 3 neighbors behind her. She was wearing a dark floral dress, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, and her face was as hard as a stone. "Diane," she said with a voice so loud the whole neighborhood could hear, "we've been looking for Grace for 3 days. The girl has postpartum depression, she ran away from home, and you have her hidden here without telling her family." I froze as if I had been slapped. Postpartum depression. Grace had run away before I could say anything. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, chimed in. "I've seen Connor looking for his wife every night. Poor thing. Don't you feel sorry for the boy?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "Sorry. Sorry for what?" I shouted, my voice trembling with rage. "It was Connor who left my daughter at a bus stop in the middle of a storm to give birth alone. And you dare to say I don't love her?" The crowd fell silent, but their eyes were full of doubt. Then I heard footsteps behind them. Connor appeared getting out of his familiar silver SUV, dressed in a white shirt, carrying a can of formula, feigning concern. He looked at me with a calm but cold voice. "Mrs. Diane Grace needs to come home. I don't want to make a scene, but if this continues, I'll have to call the police. You and she are both showing signs of mental instability." I felt the blood rush to my head. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my skin. He dared to say I was unstable, to threaten me with the police. I was about to lunge at him to scream in his face. But then I heard Grace's voice from inside, soft but firm. "Mom, I'm fine. Let me go. If they stay here making a scene, it will affect you too." I turned around and saw my daughter at the door hugging her baby. Her eyes red but trying to stay calm. My heart broke. Grace, my shy girl, was now trying to protect me when she was the one who needed protection. I wanted to hold her back, to scream that I would never let her go back with that man. But the looks of the people outside, their whispers and Grace's silence left me powerless. I had no proof, nothing to prove what Connor had done. Only my word, and a mother's word in their eyes was not trustworthy. I stood there watching Grace get into Connor's SUV with the baby in her arms. He opened the door for her with a caring gesture, but his gaze passed over me cold and defiant. Mrs. Patricia walked behind, saying nothing more, but her mocking smile seemed to say that I had lost. When the SUV disappeared, I stood at my front door, feeling like my world was collapsing. I had let my daughter go back to that house where I knew she wasn't safe. Tears welled up, but I didn't let myself cry for long. I picked up the phone and called Tom, my younger brother, the only person I trusted to help me. "Tom," I said with a broken voice, "we have to find proof. I can't let this go as if nothing happened." The night they took Grace back to her husband's house, I couldn't sleep a wink. My little house, which used to be filled with my daughter's laughter, now only had the ticking of the clock and the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. Early the next morning, I drove to my brother Tom's workshop. He worked in a small corner that smelled of oil and wires, a place where I always felt safe when I needed help. Tom was sitting in front of an old laptop, typing quickly, surrounded by scattered electronic parts. I pulled up a chair, sat across from him, and told him everything. The call in the rain, the soaked coat, the scene with Mrs. Patricia and Connor taking my daughter away. My voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger. "Tom," I said, taking Grace's shattered cell phone out of my bag. "I found this at the bus stop. See if you can recover anything. I need to know what happened to her." Tom took the phone, examined it all over, squinting as if he were deciphering a puzzle. "Sis," he said in his deep voice, "with the phone this broken, recovering the data is going to be a problem, but I'll try. And about Connor, that guy is no fool. He knows how to make everyone believe he's the perfect husband. If you want to confront him, you need stronger evidence than just your word. What if we install something in his house? I froze. Install cameras, microphones. The idea filled me with both hope and fear. Is that legal, Tom? I asked in a low voice. Tom shrugged. Legal or not, do you want to save Grace? If he was capable of leaving her stranded in the middle of a storm, he won't stop there. I nodded, although I felt uneasy inside, but I knew Tom was right. Connor was too cunning, always acting like the devoted husband in front of the neighbors. I had seen him bring Grace flowers in full view of the whole neighborhood, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, I didn't know what my daughter was enduring. I ran a hand over my face, trying to push away the helplessness. Okay, I said more firmly. Let's do it, but very carefully. I don't want Grace to get hurt. Tom nodded and took a miniature camera from his toolbox, no bigger than a coin and a recording device as thin as a sheet of paper. Sis, I know Connor usually takes Grace to the supermarket to buy diapers on Saturday afternoons. He loves to pretend he's an attentive husband. That's our chance to get into his house. I nodded, my heart racing. I wasn't used to doing things sneakily, but for Grace, I would do anything. On Saturday afternoon, I drove at a safe distance following Connor's silver SUV. He took Grace to the supermarket on the outskirts about 10 minutes from their house. I parked in a discreet corner and saw Grace get out of the carrying the baby, walking slowly as if she had no soul. Connor was by her side carrying a bag, smiling and waving to an acquaintance in the parking lot. He acted so well that I almost believed he really cared about her, but I knew it was just a facade. When they went into the supermarket, I sent Tom a message. Now Tom acted like lightning. He was wearing a dark jacket, a cap, and he slipped into the house through the back door where Grace used to leave a spare key under a flower pot. I waited in my car, my heart pounding, my eyes glued to the phone, fearing someone would discover him. 10 minutes later, Tom sent me a message. Done. The camera is in the artificial plant in the living room, the microphone behind the curtain near the baby's crib. Sis, now we just have to wait. I let out a breath, but the anxiety didn't go away. I knew that what I was about to see was going to hurt me, but I needed the truth. That night, I sat in my living room in front of Tom's laptop. He connected the camera and the image of Grace's house appeared. I almost stopped breathing when I saw her sitting on the sofa hugging my grandson, her face pale and her eyes empty. The baby was sleeping on her lap so small with his little hands clutching his mom's clothes. Then the door opened and Connor came in with a wrinkled shirt and a frown. He threw a bag on the floor and shouted, I come home dead tired from work and this house looks like a pigsty. You're so useless! His voice was as sharp as a knife, every word a wound in my heart. Grace said nothing. She just lowered her head, hugging her son tighter. He walked over and pointed his finger in her face. If I didn't bring money into this house, you two would have starved to death by now. Why can't you be even half of what Sabrina is, huh? Tom and I were silent. Sabrina. Who was that? I had never heard Grace mention her. But Connor's tone, the way he compared her to someone else, made my blood boil. I wanted to jump into the screen and get my daughter out of that house, but I could only clench my fists, my nails digging into my palms until it hurt. Tom turned to me, his voice grave. Sis, this is evidence, but we need more. He's not just emotionally abusing her. He's hiding something else. Had you heard of this Sabrina before? I shook my head, feeling that an even bigger secret was about to be revealed. That same night, the second video left me breathless. It was midnight. My grandson started crying and Grace went out onto the balcony with him in her arms, trying to soothe him. She sang to him in a low, trembling voice, as if she were fighting not to break down. Then the balcony door opened and Connor came out in a t-shirt and with his hair messy. He didn't shout, but his voice was cold as ice. If you dare to come out here again, don't expect me to come pick you up a second time. Grace stopped singing and turned to look at him, but said nothing. She hugged her son tighter as if it were the only way to protect them both. He went back inside, slamming the door, leaving Grace alone under the dim streetlight. I turned off the screen. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt fire inside. But I knew I had to stay calm. If I acted on impulse, if I went to his house at that moment, I would only make things worse. A week after Tom and I installed the cameras in Grace's house, I felt like I was living in a never-ending nightmare. More than 10 hours of footage, more than 30 short clips that Tom meticulously extracted, showed that the son-in-law I once trusted was not just a cold man, but a monster. He insulted Grace, called her useless, compared her to a woman named Sabrina, whom I still knew nothing about. But even though those videos made my blood boil, I knew they weren't enough. I needed proof of that stormy night, the night Connor abandoned my daughter at the bus stop, leaving her to give birth alone in the middle of nowhere. That would be what he couldn't deny, what would stop him from continuing to act like the perfect husband. I decided to go back to the westbound highway to the place where I found Grace. I brought a printed photo, one of Grace wearing the cream-colored maternity coat I had bought for her. It wasn't a great photo, just a quick moment I captured when she tried it on. But her smile in that picture hurt my soul. I drove, stopping at every bus stop, at every roadside diner, at every small gas station. I showed the photo to everyone I met, vendors, guards, even the truckers who were resting. "Have you seen this young woman?" I asked, my voice with exhaustion. Most of them shook their heads. Some looked at me with pity, as if I were an old woman looking for something that didn't exist. At a small gas station near the third bus stop where I had found Grace, I ran into an older man with gray hair cleaning the windshield of a light blue cargo truck. He was wearing an old jacket. His hands were rough, but his movements were slow and careful. I approached him. I showed him the photo, trying to stay calm. "Sir, have you by any chance seen this young woman? She was wearing a cream-colored coat. She was pregnant. She might have been around here about a week ago." The man looked at the photo, frowned, and then shook his head. "No, I don't remember her well. A lot of people passed through here. I didn't give up and asked him, 'Were you here last Tuesday night?' Like after 10 it was raining really hard." He stopped cleaning the windshield. He looked at me and seemed to search his memory. "That night it was pouring. You could barely see the road. I thought I saw someone standing by a post at the bus stop up ahead with my headlights, but I thought it was a broken sign. I couldn't stop. My truck carries gas. It's very dangerous." My heart beat faster. "Do you have a dash cam?" I asked, my voice trembling, not daring to get my hopes up too high. The man hesitated, looked at me for a moment, and then nodded. "Yes, but I'm not sure if that video is still saved. Let me call my nephew to bring the laptop. If you remember the day and time correctly, I can check." I nodded repeatedly, thanking him over and over, feeling like my heart was going to burst with hope. I stood there next to his truck. The cold wind made me shiver, but I didn't care. Just one piece of evidence, just one recorded moment, and I could prove what Connor had done. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a small cafe next to the gas station across from the trucker and his nephew, a slim young man with an old laptop. The boy opened the dashcam video files, going through each clip until I told him. Their stop around 10:36 on Tuesday night. He rewound in slow motion, and then on the screen I saw it. Connor's silver SUV parked right under the roof of the third bus stop. I recognized it instantly. I had seen it too many times. Its headlights were an unforgettable memory. Connor got out with a black raincoat, opened the passenger door, and yelled something at the person inside. It was raining so hard you couldn't hear anything, but I saw him raise his hand point and then slam the door. The SUV sped off, leaving behind a figure stumbling in the rain. It was Grace in her soaked cream-colored coat, her hands on her belly, walking with difficulty before collapsing. I was speechless. Tears welled up without me realizing it. "It's her," I whispered, covering my mouth. The trucker looked at me with a gentle expression, as if he understood my pain. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry. If I had known it was a person, I would have stopped." I shook my head, trying to hold back the tears. "No, it's not your fault. Thank you. Really, thank you so much." And I asked for a copy of the video, and he nodded, telling his nephew to transfer it to a USB drive for me. When I held that small drive in my hand, I felt like I was holding a ray of light in the midst of darkness. This was the proof, something Connor couldn't deny, an accidental witness, a complete stranger impossible to manipulate. That night, I took the USB to Tom. He reviewed the video, comparing it now on the screen. 10:36 p.m., just as I remembered. "Sis," Tom said in a firm voice, "this is enough to take him to court. If we combine it with the recordings and videos from the house, we can prove that he not only emotionally abuses her, but that he abandoned her in a time of emergency." I nodded, but my heart was still heavy. One afternoon, I was sitting in my small living room, the yellowish light of the old lamp illuminating the laptop screen. I watched the video Tom had just sent me again. Every frame was like a stab in the heart. Grace, my daughter, sitting on the sofa, hugging my grandson, her hands trembling as she fed him. Her pale face, her lost gaze as if her soul had been torn out. Then I noticed a small detail that made my blood boil. Connor's cell phone, which was on the table next to the sofa, suddenly lit up. It was an incoming call. He looked at the screen, got up quickly, and went out to the patio with the phone. I turned up the volume, trying to hear every word. His voice came through so sweet it was fake. "Sabrina, my love, last night you told me you were tired, right? Rest well today." "Okay, my love." I flinched, gripping the edge of the table. Sabrina. That name again, like a ghost that wouldn't go away. He kept talking in a tender voice, calling the person on the other end "my love," without the slightest hesitation, even though Grace was just a few feet away. I looked at my daughter in the video. She kept her head down, as if she didn't hear, or maybe she was already used to his cruelty. My heart ached. Connor not only emotionally abused her, not only had he abandoned her in the rain, but he was also shamelessly talking to another woman in front of his own wife. I turned off the screen. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt fire inside, but I knew that if I wanted to save Grace, I had to keep a cool head. The next morning, I decided to investigate Sabrina. I didn't know who she was, but her name had become a key piece. I went to the neighborhood where Grace lived, where the neighbors used to gather to gossip. I stopped at Mrs. Terry's laundromat, a middle-aged, talkative woman, but who knew a lot. I pretended to ask casually, "Terry, have you heard of a girl named Sabrina around here?" She stopped folding clothes, looked at me, and smiled slightly. Sabrina. Sabrina Rivers, the pretty one who lives at the beginning of 5th Street. She rents a luxury apartment, always well-dressed, but has a bad reputation. "Ah, they say her boyfriend is an office worker, but she spends like she's rich. Who knows who pays for that lifestyle?" I nodded, thanked her, but inside I felt a whirlwind. Office worker Connor was just an administrative employee. How could he have money to support someone like that? That night I couldn't sit still. I took my truck and drove to 5th Street where Terry said Sabrina lived. I parked in a dark corner near a small store and waited. At 7 in the evening, Connor's silver SUV appeared. I recognized it immediately. It had haunted me since that stormy night. He got out with a white shirt and well-combed hair, looking like an exemplary man. Then a young woman with long, shiny hair and a tight dress came out of the building. He hugged her in a soft but intimate way, and then gave her a kiss on the forehead as if they were husband and wife. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking as I took out my cell phone to record. I tried to hold it steady, capturing every moment. He smiled, said something to her, and then they both went into the building hand in hand. I drove home with a broken heart. I wasn't just angry with Connor. I hurt for Grace. She had been living with a liar, a man who not only abused her, but betrayed her. I went to Grace's house that same night when Connor hadn't returned yet. She was sitting in the living room holding my grandson with a tired look. I pulled up a chair, sat next to her, opened my cell phone, and showed her the video. "Grace, look," I said with a trembling voice. "This is Connor, and this is the woman he talks about, Sabrina." Grace looked at the screen, her hands gripping the baby tighter, and then she burst into tears. Sobs that tore through the silence. "Mom," she said between sobs. I knew it. I saw strange messages on his phone once. I asked him, but he laughed and told me I was crazy. And that night, the night he left me at the bus stop, it was because I dared to confront him. I hugged Grace, feeling her body tremble in my arms. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked as my own tears fell. She shook her head. "I was scared, Mom. He said if I told anyone, he would make everyone think I was crazy." I didn't want you to get into trouble. I felt a deep bitterness. Grace, my good girl, always trying to protect me, even when she was the one who was hurt. I stroked her hair, trying to stay calm. I'm not going to let him keep hurting you. I promise. But in my mind, a bigger question began to form. Connor was just an administrative employee. Where did he get the money to rent a luxury apartment, buy expensive clothes, and maintain Sabrina's lifestyle? I remembered the videos, the way he always boasted about earning the money to support Grace and the baby. Something didn't add up. I decided to investigate further, and the next morning I went to Connor's company at lunchtime. I introduced myself as his mother-in-law, asking to speak with management about an important family matter. The receptionist, a young woman named Anne, took me to a waiting room. When I sat down, she whispered to me with a worried voice, "Ma'am, haven't you heard our bosses are investigating Connor? There are reports of unjustified money transfers from within, and everyone suspects it was him." Anne's words were like a flash of light in my head. Money. So Connor wasn't just cheating on and abusing Grace, but he was also involved in something shady at his job. I thanked Anne, trying to seem calm, but inside I felt a hurricane. A week later, I received an unexpected call. The phone rang at noon while I was sitting in the kitchen, a cup of cold coffee in my hand. The number was unknown, but the voice on the other end was clear, polite, but firm. "Mrs. Diane, this is Robert Miller, Executive Vice President of the company where Connor Pierce works. We have received a copy of the dashcam video and some recordings of the psychological abuse in his home. We need to see you immediately." I froze the cup, almost slipping from my hands. My heart was pounding, a mixture of hope and fear. Did someone believe me? Or was it another of Connor's traps? I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Of course, I'll be right there." "What time works for you?" Mr. Miller replied. "Today at 2 in the afternoon at the main offices. Bring any documents you have. We need to review everything thoroughly." I arrived at the offices, a modern glass building in the city center. Sitting in a small conference room, I felt out of place among the leather chairs and polished wooden table. Mr. Miller entered, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a sharp gaze. He was accompanied by a woman with black hair dressed in a gray blouse, with a gaze so alert it seemed she could see through things. "I'm Valerie Peterson," she introduced herself in a firm voice. "Internal auditor. I've been tasked with investigating the suspicious money transfers related to Connor Pierce." I nodded, trying to hide my nervousness. "I brought everything I have," I said, placing the USB drive and a folder of documents on the table. "This is what I've gathered on Connor." Valerie opened her laptop, displaying a detailed analysis chart. She pointed to the screen. Her voice was monotonous but convincing. "In the last 3 months, $112,000 has been withdrawn from the company's account, divided into multiple transactions, and transferred to a secondary account in the name of Sabrina Rivers. There is a history of expenses for a luxury apartment on 5th Street, spa services, and expensive gift cards." I looked at the numbers, the words on the screen not surprised. I already suspected Connor was into something shady when I learned about Sabrina, but seeing the proof so clearly filled me with anger and pain. He not only abused and betrayed Grace, but he was stealing money to support another woman. "Has he been doing this for a long time?" I asked with a trembling voice. Valerie looked at me. "At least 6 months. But we just found out thanks to an internal report." I handed them the USB drive. "Here is everything I have," I said, trying to stay calm. The video from the camera in Grace's house, the recording of Connor insulting her, the clip from the dash cam at the bus stop, and the photos of him with Sabrina. Valerie took the USB, plugged it into her laptop, and reviewed each file. Her expression didn't change, but Mr. Miller frowned, drumming his fingers on the table. "Mrs. Diane," he said, "this is very strong evidence. It not only proves the abuse, but it reinforces Connor's motive. He was afraid Grace would discover his infidelity and the financial fraud, so he looked for a way to silence her." I nodded, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. Finally, someone believed me. Finally, I wasn't alone. 2 days later, Tom called me in the middle of the night. His voice was rushed. Sis Connor's company just issued a statement. They suspended him indefinitely. He's under internal investigation. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Really, Tom? They acted that fast? Tom laughed softly. Sis, with what you gave them, they couldn't ignore it. But be careful. Connor is not one to give up easily. Tom's words sent a chill down my spine. I knew Connor was cunning, but I didn't imagine he would react so quickly. The next morning, I opened Facebook to see if there was any news from the neighborhood. But what I saw left me frozen. A long post on Connor's profile with a title that paralyzed me. When you just want to be a good husband, but they turn you into the villain. He wrote like a victim saying that I, his mother-in-law, had slandered him, made up stories, destroyed his family. He posted old videos, him holding my grandson, cleaning up spilled milk, kissing Grace's forehead while she slept, all with soft background music. I watched it with trembling hands, the blood boiling in my veins. Those images were real, but I knew they were just a facade. How long had he been putting on this show and how many people had believed him? Underneath the post, his mother, Mrs. Patricia, left the first comment like a stab in my heart. My son is taking all the blame, but the reality is that Grace was diagnosed with postpartum emotional disorder. She herself said that her own mother wanted to harm her, and now that mother blames my son. That morning, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The social media notifications piled up. Messages, comments, even calls from distant relatives I barely remembered. A niece called me, her voice hesitant. Auntie, I didn't think my cousin-in-law was suffering so much. Please don't make the problem bigger. Okay. I gripped the phone, wanting to scream, but I stayed silent. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was too tired of having to explain myself. I opened Facebook, and Connor's post hit me again like a play designed to make me the bad guy. Shared over 400 times, hundreds of comments of compassion, calling him a devoted husband harassed by a controlling mother-in-law. He wrote a long text, every word calculated. Mrs. Diane, my mother-in-law, has always wanted to control Grace's life. She never accepted me, never accepted her daughter's happiness. Even though Grace doesn't trust me, I still change my son's diapers. I buy his medicine when he has a fever. I rock him to sleep every night. I read it with trembling hands, the blood rushing to my head. He called me the shadow that silently destroys her own daughter's life. He posted short videos, him holding my grandson with a big smile, cleaning up spilled milk, kissing Grace's forehead while she slept. The music was soft. The lighting in the videos was edited to make everything seem natural and warm. But I knew it wasn't the truth. It was a perfect act staged to hide what he had done. I wanted to scream to post a response, but I knew if I did, I would fall into his trap. He wanted me to lose my cool to become the old gossip the malicious comments said I was. Under the post, unknown profiles jumped to Connor's defense, insulting me. That old woman is jealous of her daughter's happiness, wanting to separate a young family. How evil. I read and felt a sharp pain. The neighbors who used to smile at me, who had had coffee with me, now looked at me with suspicion. I went to the market and felt their sideways glances, the whispers behind my back. That's her Grace's mom. They say she slandered her son-in-law. I lowered my head and walked faster, but I felt my heart tighten. I had fought to protect my daughter, and now I was the one being criticized. 2 days later, I was with Tom in his workshop reviewing the videos from the camera in Grace's house. I wanted to find more evidence, anything that would unmask Connor's act. Tom, with his sharp gaze, pointed to a video. Sis, look at this. Now, the clip Connor uploaded to Facebook where he's holding the baby was filmed on the same day as this other one. I looked at the screen and saw Connor holding my grandson, smiling like a model father. But just a few hours later, in another video from the hidden camera, he slapped Grace in the living room right when she accidentally dropped a glass of water. How are you going to take care of a child if you're so clumsy? He yelled at her, his voice icy. Grace just lowered her head, not daring to answer. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my skin. Tom, I said with a broken voice. He filmed those videos to put on an act. Did he know we had cameras there? Tom shook his head. No assist, he didn't know. Those videos are from before he probably filmed them to maintain an image, but now he's using them to divert attention. I looked at Connor's post again and saw a comment that chilled me to the bone. Mrs. Patricia, his mother, had uploaded a photo of a medical paper with the text, "Patient Grace Hayes presents symptoms of postpartum depression. It is recommended to avoid contact with people who cause her emotional stress." The logo of a well-known hospital was in a corner with the illegible signature of a doctor. Under the comment, dozens of people shared it, saying that I was the cause of Grace's depression. That mother is driving her daughter crazy. Poor Connor having to put up with a mother-in-law like that. I stared at the screen, feeling like the whole world was turning its back on me. Grace with depression. She had never told me, and the hospital doctors didn't mention anything. Was it true, or was it another of his tricks? That night, I turned on the TV looking for something to distract me from the attacks. But a brief news story on the local channel stunned me. The headline on the screen read, "Clown owner arrested for forging medical documents. More than 40 psychological certificates seized. Some used to evade legal responsibility in divorces and disputes." The reporter showed a close-up of the clinic's logo, and I recognized it instantly. It was the same logo from the medical paper Mrs. Patricia had posted. I immediately took a picture of the screen and sent it to Tom and Rebecca, the lawyer I had contacted the week before for advice. "Tom, Rebecca, look at this. That medical paper is fake," I wrote next to the photo full of hope. Rebecca responded instantly, "Mrs. Diane, this is a very important development. If we prove the document is fake, Connor's whole act falls apart." Her voice through the message was cold but confident, like someone who knows they have the upper hand. Tom came to my house the next morning with a printout of the fake medical document. He enlarged the bottom left corner where the clinic's registration number was. "Sis, I already verified it," he said, pointing to his laptop. "This number doesn't exist in the national health system. That clinic was just shut down for forging documents. He and his mother went too far." I looked at the number. Those tiny letters I hadn't noticed, but which now seemed to open a door to the truth. I nodded, trying to stay calm. "Tom, we have to act now. I'm not going to let them keep hurting Grace with these lies." Rebecca called the prosecutor's office to confirm the information about the clinic. A few hours later, she sent me a message. "Mrs. Diane, it's just as you thought. The clinic was shut down last week for selling fake documents for divorce and legal dispute cases. Mrs. Patricia's paper is one of them." I gripped the phone, feeling a new strength. Connor and his mother had staged a perfect act, turning Grace into the victim of a made-up illness, and me into the villain. But now I had the proof to unmask them. I spent the whole afternoon gathering everything. I took out the USB drive with the dashcam video from the bus stop where Connor abandoned Grace in the rain. I organized the clips from the hidden camera, the recordings of Connor's voice insulting and humiliating her. I printed the photo of Connor hugging Sabrina on 5th Street and Valerie's financial analysis, which proved the embezzlement of $112,000 from the company. Finally, I placed the photo of the news story about the fake clinic on top of everything like the jewel of my collection of evidence. I looked at the pile of documents on the table, my heart heavy but full of determination. This wasn't just a battle for Grace. It was also for me, a mother who an entire neighborhood had turned their back on just for wanting to protect her daughter. The next morning, Rebecca and I went to the city police headquarters. I walked in with a thick folder, feeling like I was carrying my whole life in my hands. The officer who attended to us, a middle-aged man with a serious look, reviewed every page, watched every video. "Mrs. Diane," he said in a grave voice, "what you've brought us is very serious. We will open an official investigation for the crimes of domestic violence, document forgery, and corporate fraud." I nodded, trying to hold back the tears that wanted to come out. "Thank you, officer," I said with a broken voice. "I just want my daughter to be safe." He looked at me and his expression softened. "We'll do everything we can." After 2 days of statements, the case was turned over to the family court and the criminal court. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later, a time that felt like an eternity to me. I knew Connor wouldn't just sit back. He was strangely silent on social media. There were no new posts, no comments from Mrs. Patricia, but I wasn't naive enough to believe he was sorry. People like Connor never shut up out of remorse. He was preparing his next move, and I had to be ready. Tom called me one night. His voice rushed. "Sis, I just discovered something. The bank account in Sabrina Rivers's name is being emptied little by little, transferring the money to several small electronic wallets. He's trying to cover his tracks." I froze. "What do you mean? Is he going to get rid of Sabrina too?" Tom nodded over the phone. "Exactly. I spoke to a friend who works at the bank. These transactions started right after Connor was suspended. He knows he's being investigated and he's cutting all ties." I called Valerie immediately and she confirmed it. "Mrs. Diane, our internal records show the same thing. He's using Sabrina as a scapegoat. Connor only keeps people around as long as they're useful to him." I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't feel sorry for Sabrina. She had chosen to be on Connor's side and had contributed to Grace's pain. But I saw his cruelty clearly. He not only cheated on his wife and stole money, but he was willing to discard his lover as soon as she was no longer useful. The morning of the hearing, the sky was overcast with gray clouds that seemed to crush my spirit. I arrived early at the courthouse, sitting next to Grace in a cold waiting room. She was wearing a long pale blue dress and she was holding my grandson tightly. Her hands were trembling, but her gaze was firm. I looked at her feeling a mixture of pride and pain. Grace, my daughter once so fragile and scared, was now striving to face the nightmare named Connor. "I'm here, honey," I whispered, taking her hand. She nodded without speaking, but the gentle squeeze let me know she was leaning on me just as I had always been her support since she was a child. Rebecca, our lawyer, had arrived the night before with a folder full of documents. She reviewed every page, every video, every copy with the sharp gaze of a warrior ready for battle. Valerie was also there with a stack of accounting papers stamped in red, her face calm but determined. "Mrs. Diane," Valerie said in a grave voice, "today we'll make sure he has no escape." I nodded, trying to hide the anxiety that was consuming me. I had come so far. I had gathered all the evidence, but I was still afraid. Afraid that Connor, with his cunning, would find a way to turn the situation around once more. Connor arrived 10 minutes late, entering the courtroom in a light gray suit, his hair combed, fine and calm. He was accompanied by his mother, Mrs. Patricia, and Sabrina, the young woman I had seen in the video from 5th Street. Mrs. Patricia was dressed in black, her face as hard as a stone while Sabrina kept her head down, her hands clasped in front of her. I glanced at Grace and saw her watching Sabrina for a moment before quickly looking down, holding my grandson tighter. I knew she was holding back, fighting to keep the pain from overwhelming her. I put my hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You're so strong, Grace." "I'm here." She nodded slightly, but her eyes were still full of hurt. The hearing began. The atmosphere in the courtroom was as heavy as the sky outside. Rebecca stood up and presented the charges in a clear, sharp voice. She showed every piece of evidence. The dash cam video of Connor abandoning Grace in the rain, the clips from the hidden camera where he insulted and threatened her, the photos of him hugging Sabrina, and the financial analysis that proved the embezzlement of $112,000. She concluded with the fake medical certificate that Mrs. Patricia posted on Facebook along with the information about the closed clinic. The courtroom fell silent. Only the rustling of pages and the held breaths of those present could be heard. I looked around and saw the expressions of some jury members change from doubt to astonishment. When it was Connor's lawyer's turn, I held my breath, preparing for a long string of denials. But what happened stunned me. His lawyer, a short man with thick glasses, stood up and said in a calm voice, "We do not dispute the evidence presented." A murmur went through the room and I felt my heart stop. They didn't dispute it. Connor stood up. He looked directly at the judge and said in a clear voice, "I admit I made mistakes, but I was not the mastermind. I only followed the orders of my mother, Olivia, and Miss Sabrina Rivers, who planned the social media campaign, edited the videos, and obtained the fake medical documents." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Rebecca turned to look at me, her eyes filled with surprise. I leaned over and looked at Sabrina. She was rigid, her face pale, clenching her hands so tight her nails dug into her skin. Mrs. Patricia jumped up, pointing at Connor and shouting, "Liar! You said you would take care of everything, that I should just do what you told me." The judge slammed the gavel, her voice stern. "Order in the court." But Mrs. Patricia's shout echoed in my head. Connor, who always acted like the perfect husband, was now turning his back on his own mother and his lover. He was willing to sink them to save himself. Sabrina remained silent, not saying a word, her head bowed and her hands trembling. Judge Peterson, a middle-aged woman with a piercing gaze, asked Sabrina to take the stand as a witness. She walked slowly, not looking at Connor, not looking at anyone. Rebecca approached, holding up a bag with a USB drive. Her voice was calm but loaded with pressure. "We have more material, Your Honor, but the important thing is Miss Rivers. Do you have anything to clarify?" Sabrina looked up, and for the first time she looked directly at me. Her gaze was not one of hatred, but something more complex, regret, fear, or both. Then she looked at Grace and finally at Connor, her gaze lingering on him as if she were weighing something. The courtroom fell silent. Only the ticking of the clock on the wall could be heard. Sabrina took a deep breath and said in a low but clear voice, "Yes, I have a lot to say." My heart was pounding, not knowing what she would say. Would she defend Connor or unmask him? I took Grace's hand, feeling it cold. "Mom," my daughter whispered, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand, trying to give her some of my strength. "It's okay, honey," I told her, although I was trembling too. Sabrina was there in front of the whole courtroom, and I knew that what she was about to say would change everything. Sabrina, standing on the witness stand, began by taking out her cell phone and handing it to the court technician with a slow movement, as if she were lifting a weight off her shoulders. She opened a series of emails and screenshots. Her voice was monotonous but heavy with weight. "This is what I have." The technician projected the documents onto a large screen. I saw the messages Connor had sent to Sabrina. "If my mom finds out about this, blame it all on her? I'll say she did it alone to save face." Then a detailed plan for the Facebook post written by Connor himself with his scribbled signature at the end. I froze when I saw the chats with a certain Robert M., the fake doctor where Connor agreed to buy the fake medical certificate for $3,000. And finally, a short clip showing Connor calling Sabrina to scold her for not editing the part where he washed the diapers well in the video he used to build his image of a perfect father. The courtroom fell silent. I looked at Grace and saw she was holding her breath, her hands clutching my grandson and her eyes full of tears. I turned to Valerie and she nodded slightly. Her look seemed to say, "This is the final blow." Sabrina continued, her voice firm. "I made a mistake. I thought I was special. That Connor loved me. I know I'm not a victim, but I can't continue to be an accomplice to his lies either. He deceived all of us. Grace, his mother, and me." Connor, sitting in the defendant's box, had a pale face and clenched fists. He shouted, his voice breaking, "What are you saying, Sabrina? You promised you wouldn't." Judge Peterson slammed the gavel, her voice stern. "Silence, defendant." But his shout echoed in my head like that of a cornered animal. Rebecca stood up, holding a USB drive, her voice sharp. "Your Honor, we have more documents that confirm it. The money transfers from the defendant's company to Miss Sabrina's account without concept coincide with a cycle of fake payroll payments and with the rent and luxury purchase invoices, which in turn coincide with the dates of the company's withdrawals." She presented each figure, each date, as if she were painting a clear picture of Connor's deceit. I was sitting there watching the evidence on the screen, feeling a mixture of relief and pain. Relief because the truth was finally coming out, but pain because Grace had had to suffer so much to get to this day. After 30 minutes of deliberation, Judge Peterson returned. Her face was serious, but her gaze determined. She slammed the gavel and her voice boomed in the courtroom. "Connor Pierce is found guilty of organized domestic violence, document forgery, and breach of trust to commit fraud. He is sentenced to 9 years in prison and the confiscation of his personal assets. His parental rights are terminated, and he is permanently prohibited from approaching Grace Hayes and her mother." The courtroom fell silent, and then a sob escaped from Grace. She hugged my grandson tightly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom," she whispered with a choked voice, I took her hand, not crying, but with my head held high. I had fought and we had won. Sabrina left the courthouse in silence. No one stopped her. I watched her walk away, not knowing whether to feel anger or pity. She had chosen the wrong side, but in the end, she was the one who helped the truth come out. They took Connor away, his face pale, his gaze empty. Mrs. Patricia remained seated in her place, her head bowed without saying a word. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. A family had been broken, not because of me, but because of the lies Connor himself had built. A month later, Grace and I were sitting in my small kitchen. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the room. My grandson, little Luke, was in his crib, waving his little hands. Grace looked at him and a smile, the first in many months, appeared on her face. "Mom," she said softly, "I want to do something to help other women like me." I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest. We began to plan the Bright Light Foundation, named in honor of my grandson to support women victims of psychological violence and financial manipulation in marriage. I looked at Grace and I saw her stronger like a flower that had survived the storm. I was no longer the mother who watched her daughter suffer from the outside. I had walked through the rain, faced the lies, the looks of mistrust, and my own fear. I learned that justice is not always served, but it always begins with those who dare to raise their voice. "Grace," I said, taking her hand. "I'm so proud of you," she smiled, her eyes shining. "I'm proud of you too, Mom." And in that moment, I knew that no matter how painful the past was together, we would build a better future for Grace, for little Luke, and for all the women who need a ray of hope. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I really wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you two of the most beloved stories from the Her Payback Tales channel. I am sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.